This is an artificially aware original production.
Imagine you're talking to someone, pouring your heart out, and halfway through, you notice their eyes have drifted to their phone screen. Or you've walked into an intense conversation with your partner, only to be met with a distant stare, or worse, blank silence. Suddenly, you're speaking two completely different languages. This strange phenomenon of talking without ever truly connecting happens so often that many of you think it's just how communication is supposed to go. But here's a fact to knock your socks off. Communication isn't supposed to be so clumsy, so messy. Humans are social creatures, yes, but there's a colossal gap between having the urge to connect and actually being skilled at it. Most of you are just dancing around, saying things you don't mean, or worse, meaning things you don't say. Oren Jay Sofer gets it. In his book, Say What You Mean, he doesn't give you a fluffy, feel-good roadmap. He gives you the exact tools to take a sledgehammer to those worn-out habits and bring clarity and mindfulness into your words. This isn't about shallow politeness. It's about tapping into the raw, mindful power of honest dialogue. And who's this Oren Jay Sofer, the guy claiming he can get you to finally communicate without stumbling into conflict or feeling misunderstood? Sofer isn't just another self-help author cranking out feel-good phrases. He's a certified expert in nonviolent communication and mindfulness, an odd yet brilliant mix. Picture a guy who can not only meditate his way out of stress, but also guide you to speak your mind without turning every conversation into a battleground. Sofer's life's work is built around merging ancient mindfulness techniques with communication theory, bringing a whole new approach to those seemingly endless verbal loops humans trap themselves in. He's founded Next Step Dharma to help people find their own peace, and even co-founded Mindful Healthcare to teach caregivers how to communicate without burning out. You know what that means? The guy gets it. He understands the complexities and subtle cracks in communication, and he's made it his mission to make sense of it all. It's not about fancy language or some guru-esque speak your truth mantra. It's grounded, practical, and shockingly attainable. So when Sofer says there's a new way to communicate, a way that sidesteps conflict and lands in genuine understanding, it's worth paying attention. So what's the whole point of communication anyway? Here's a spoiler. It's not about proving a point, winning an argument, or even really about you at all. According to Sofer, the whole purpose of communication is understanding. Sounds simple, right? But how often do you actually focus on understanding? Let's face it, in most conversations, you're either strategizing your next point, mentally tallying up grievances, or just outright tuning out because, well, the other person doesn't get it. Sofer argues that every single word you speak should be driven by the aim to understand and be understood. Everything else is secondary. This isn't just a soft goal, it's foundational. Without understanding, every word you throw out there, every frustrated sigh, every raised eyebrow is just noise. Imagine if every conversation began with the intention to truly listen and comprehend the other person. That would be a game changer. To Sofer, this is the real bottom line of human connection, moving from self-focused talking to understanding-focused dialogue. Strip away the ego, the need to be right, and you're left with a raw, true exchange that's rare but powerful. At the heart of Sofer's approach is an odd and elusive concept: presence. Let's talk about that. We're not talking about simply showing up in body, but about being there in the full, grounded sense of the word. Imagine that presence is a kind of silent agreement with yourself to be exactly where you are, fully tuned in. In communication, presence is often the one thing you don't think about, but it's also the first thing you notice when it's missing. Ever tried talking to someone who's obviously mentally checked out? That's what absence feels like. Presence, on the other hand, is almost magnetic. When you're truly present, others feel it. They know, even without words, that they're seen and heard. But here's the kicker: presence doesn't come naturally in high-stress conversations, or when you're trying to avoid conflict or win someone over. It's easy to lose touch with presence the moment you feel a pang of anger or frustration. But according to Sofer, you can practice presence like any other skill, and it's the key to unlocking genuine communication. This isn't just a mental trick, it's about realigning your entire attention, learning to be in your body and mind without checking out every time things get intense. So, how do you actually practice this elusive presence Sofer talks about? It's one thing to say, stay present, and quite another to actually do it, especially when someone's throwing a verbal jab your way or ignoring everything you're saying. Sofer has a practical technique: reflective pauses. You can think of it as a kind of self check in, a moment where you slow down and let yourself feel. For instance, instead of launching into an immediate reaction the next time someone frustrates you, take a split second to ask, "What's going on inside me right now?" It's simple but profound. It's like pulling the emergency brake in the middle of an emotional collision. In that tiny pause, you open up space to choose how you respond, rather than letting old habits or knee-jerk reactions steer the conversation off a cliff. And here's the real deal: reflective pauses are not just good manners or a calming technique. They're a radical move that gives you control over your reactions, letting you steer the dialogue toward understanding rather than mutual frustration. It's not an easy skill, and it takes practice. But this kind of mindfulness doesn't just make you a better communicator, it makes you a better human. Let's put this whole reflective pause thing to the ultimate test, shall we? Sofer tells a story that hits hard. A meditation teacher in a prison asked a group of inmates to add up their combined prison sentences. The total over 100 years. Then he asked them how long it took to decide on the actions that landed them there. The answer? Less than 2 minutes. Less than 2 minutes between impulse and action had cost them lifetimes. Now, sure, you may not be living with criminal impulses, but the stakes of a thoughtless reaction in an argument, a relationship, or even a casual conversation are much higher than they seem. Each choice is a brick in the architecture of your relationships, and every impulse you don't check can lead you away from what you actually want. Sofer's 2-minute story is a visceral reminder that there is a stark cost to unexamined reactions. Reflective pauses, those tiny pockets of awareness, act as your personal timeouts, keeping you from bulldozing into regret. Every time you practice pausing before reacting, you're choosing freedom over the chains of knee-jerk responses. If pausing is your first line of defense in mindful conversation, then choice points are the second. Choice points, according to Sofer, are those moments in a conversation where you decide whether to speak, listen, or simply sit with silence. Think of it as a tiny fork in the road that appears mid-conversation. Most people charge past these choice points without noticing them, too busy venting, explaining, or winning to see that they have options. But when you're mindful of these points, you realize that each one holds the potential to shift the entire flow of dialogue. So, how do you find your choice points? Start with someone familiar and safe. Try paying attention to when you want to speak and when you could listen. Notice the urge to jump in with advice or interrupt, and decide if you really need to. The more you practice, the more you'll see that conversations are not just streams of words, but a rhythmic dance of decisions. With each choice point, you reclaim control over the dialogue's direction. No one's asking you to become a conversational monk, just to recognize that every pause, every decision to speak or not, can steer the conversation toward clarity or chaos. And then there's the way conflict just creeps in, sneaky as a shadow. Sofer identifies 4 typical conflict styles that humans fall back on. First, you have conflict avoidance, the kind where you'd rather walk on coals than bring up a tough topic. You change the subject, you walk away, anything to keep from confronting. Then there's competitive confrontation, where you bulldoze through the other person's feelings just to make your point. Picture an argumentative lawyer pushing relentlessly for a win. Next up is passivity, where you shrink back, agree to whatever's said, and abandon your own needs entirely. And then there's passive aggression, that oh so subtle art of retaliating without ever directly saying what you mean. Think of the silent treatment or muttering under your breath. Here's the harsh truth. These styles aren't doing you any favors. They're relics, habits formed out of defensiveness and fear. Sofer doesn't mince words here. If you want to communicate effectively, you need to see and replace these patterns. Recognize yourself in any of these. Good. Awareness is the first step. Sofer invites you to acknowledge these habits, not as flaws, but as old coping mechanisms that no longer serve you. Here's a revolutionary thought. What if, in every conversation, you replace judgment with curiosity? What if, instead of seeing someone's behavior and immediately categorizing it as bad or wrong, you just wondered about it? Sofer points out that intentions in conversation are everything. Most of the time, people walk into conversations armed with assumptions and judgments, ready to defend, deflect, or dismantle. And yet, if you approached each interaction with 2 things, curiosity and care, you'd find a very different kind of dialogue unfolding. Imagine asking questions like, what does this person care about right now? Or what am I trying to learn here? It sounds simple, but it's a potent shift. Curiosity is the antidote to judgment, and care is its partner. Care doesn't mean you agree or validate everything the other person says. It means you recognize their humanity, that they too have needs and emotions. So, next time you feel that judgment rising, try to flip the switch. Let curiosity and care lead the way, and watch as your conversations stop feeling like battles and start feeling like opportunities to connect. You're not listening to me. The 4 words guaranteed to ignite defensiveness in any conversation. Listening, Sofer explains, is far more than waiting for your turn to speak. True listening is a radical act. It's a form of connection so rare that most people are shocked when they actually experience it. Here's the magic. When you genuinely listen, you make the other person feel understood, and in turn, they feel valued. One of Sofer's practical tools here is reflection. When someone speaks, you repeat back what you heard, not as a robotic echo, but as a sincere effort to ensure you've understood. Imagine your partner says, "I'm so tired of doing everything around here." Instead of snapping back with, "Oh yeah, I did laundry last week," you simply reflect, "Sounds like you're really exhausted from carrying the load." This reflection alone can diffuse tension because it shows you're actually tuned in. It's not about agreement, it's about empathy. Reflection is how you keep the thread of connection alive, especially in the heat of frustration. You may not always feel like listening, but if you aim to keep the connection intact, you'll find yourself naturally drawn to really hearing what the other person has to say. Let's talk about needs, because here's a truth bomb. All human behavior, including every bit of what you say and don't say, comes down to needs. Sofer explains that needs are what truly drive us. They're the bedrock of everything from joy to rage. But here's the kicker. Needs don't usually appear directly in conversation. Instead, they show up disguised as strategies, masked by our demands or complaints. Think about it. When you tell someone, "I need you to listen to me," you're expressing a strategy, not a need. The actual need could be understanding, connection, or simply respect. The magic happens when you stop focusing on strategies and get to the needs behind them. Once you're in touch with your own needs, you can spot the needs behind others' words too, creating a kind of empathy sonar that strengthens connections. Suddenly, conflicts feel less like wrestling matches and more like puzzles to be solved. So next time you feel the tension building, ask yourself, what do I really need here? And what might this person need? It's a paradigm shift that turns conversations from tug-of-war battles into bridges that connect rather than divide. And then there's the matter of emotions, those volatile, often unpredictable forces that shape conversations before you've even said a word. Sofer insists that emotions aren't just noise in the background, they're critical signals that point us straight to our needs. Each emotion, whether it's joy, anger, or sadness, is your internal GPS system, guiding you toward what matters to you. But here's the cultural catch. You humans are often taught to suppress or ignore your emotions, treating them as irrational or even shameful. So what happens? Emotions get bottled up until they explode, or worse, they seep out in sneaky ways like passive-aggressive remarks or silent resentment. Sofer's advice is straightforward yet profound. Start seeing your emotions as allies, not enemies. When you're angry, sad, or thrilled, ask yourself, what need is this feeling pointing to? Let emotions guide you to your underlying needs instead of letting them hijack the conversation. Recognizing emotions as signals changes the game because now, instead of being overcome by them, you're using them as tools to better understand yourself and communicate with others. Sooner or later, every meaningful relationship will face difficult conversations. How do you bring up these thorny issues without throwing a grenade into the relationship? Sofer's answer is deceptively simple but incredibly powerful. Focus on observations, not judgments. Picture this. Your partner comes home late, and your immediate reaction is to think, they don't care about me. That's a judgment. Instead, Sofer suggests breaking it down into what an outsider could objectively observe. When you arrived home 2 hours after dinner, I felt disappointed. See the difference? Observations are neutral. They describe what happened without slapping a label on it. Judgments, on the other hand, are loaded. They push buttons, ignite defenses, and can lead to escalation in the blink of an eye. So the next time you need to raise a difficult issue, try framing it as an observation. Leave the judgments at the door, and you'll see how much easier it is to open a conversation that could otherwise end in resentment or even anger. Observations invite discussion, judgments invite defensiveness. This single shift could change the way you handle conflicts forever. Making a request isn't always easy, especially when vulnerability is involved. Sofer insists that effective requests have three magic ingredients: positivity, specificity, and flexibility. Here's the deal. Instead of demanding what you don't want, focus on what you do want. Think about it. I want you to stop ignoring me feels like an attack, while I'd really appreciate it if you could look up from your phone when we're talking is clear and inviting. Then there's specificity. Vague requests leave people guessing, leading to frustration and misunderstandings. Instead of saying, I need more support, try, could you take out the trash on Wednesdays? And lastly, flexibility. Make your request more of an invitation than an ultimatum. Rather than, you need to change this now, go for something like, would you be open to trying this new way of handling things? These three elements, positivity, specificity, and flexibility, don't just make your requests clearer, they make them easier to respond to. When you ask with clarity and openness, people feel invited, not cornered. And in that space, genuine solutions start to emerge. In the end, Sofer's approach to communication can be summed up as a dance. You're not here to dominate or be dominated. You're here to move together, to respond, to be attuned to each other's rhythm. Like any dance, conversation has its own ebb and flow, a delicate balance of speaking and listening, pausing and responding. But here's the twist. You can't control the whole dance. You can't control how the other person moves or what rhythm they bring to the floor. But you can control your own steps, making sure they're mindful, intentional, and open. In Sofer's words, a successful conversation is less about winning or losing and more about finding harmony, about flowing with the moment instead of trying to force it. So if you want conversations that matter, if you want to connect instead of clash, you have to learn the dance. You have to show up, be present, choose your words carefully, and listen as if the other person's words were a part of you. Because in the end, they are. Every connection you make strengthens the complex web of your life. And in this dance, the deeper you go, the more you discover that it's not just about understanding others, it's about understanding yourself. And there you have it, folks. Say What You Mean is more than a book on communication. It's a roadmap to becoming a clearer, more present, and connected human being. So next time you're in a conversation that's slipping into familiar patterns of frustration or disconnection, remember Sofer's lessons. Pause, reflect, stay present, and move with curiosity and care. Communication isn't just about words, it's about the intention, the choice, the rhythm of engagement. If you found this journey insightful, drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that like button, and of course, subscribe for more eye-opening conversations. Until next time, stay curious and keep dancing.